How you doing today?
Yeah, well, scatterbrained as usual. I'm just running around like, 50 different things going on. And
And it's a weekend, so when you put the tools down and walk away from the shop, you have daily household chores to take care of.
oh yeah, yep. There's all of that. And then, of course, here I'm sitting in my computer where I got all my stuff for working on all my videos and everything. And it's a lot of stuff. It's
Sure. Yeah, you
pretty
can never
distracting.
take a mental break at all. I
Oh yeah,
understand that.
no,
Well,
that's exactly right.
Matt, I have to thank you for joining me, though. I know as techs, our time is super valuable, and I appreciate you joining me. Thank you.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I love tapping into the brains of because we can all learn from each other, and the stuff that you post, that's how I found you. uh, I had a client with a pickup that was not working, ran it through all the tests, the multimeter, yada yada, and I found out that it was that copper wire wasn't making contact on the single coil pickup. The copper wire had
Yep,
snapped off its contact. So I found your video of how you unwound a few, you took off the wax wrap, et
yep.
cetera, the cloth and all that, and then pulled the copper wire out a few spools, and then just looped it around that hole, soldered it on, and put the hot connection back on.
Oh
I'm like,
yeah,
dude,
yep,
I've never done that before, and it was empowering. I'm like, this is awesome.
yep.
I got to reach out to this guy, and I started watching your other videos, and a plethora of information peppered with a lot of great music videos because you're a fantastic player.
Well, thanks. And it is nice that most of my views are the tech stuff because, as a guitarist, it's like you can be a little self-conscious, people commenting and watching. And I said, well, it's actually kind of nice that the algorithm doesn't pick up too much on some of my music stuff. So it's like I know it's not going to be this huge thing. I can kind of just do what I want and not have to worry about
Yeah.
whereas with some of the tech videos, I've gotten a lot better, kind of, just ignoring negative comments. The negative ones don't actually bother me. It's the ones that actually make a point where I'm like, oh my God, I did something wrong, or I didn't use the right tool for this. And it's not like an ego thing. I'm like, now it's
Mhm.
like, okay, now I've got to go back and redo the whole thing.
And
Like
you've done that before, huh?
yeah, that's actually just did that yesterday, or the Easy Lock threaded insert installation video. And I had about
Yeah,
six.
right.
Yeah, and 6 months ago or so, and this guy, he's great. I forget I think his name is, I think his username's like Raven Moon or something. This guy's great. Now, I was on a group online where he's in pickup winding. He's got a ton of experience winding pickups, but he left a comment on the video, and I can't believe that nobody caught this. Like I was, kind of embarrassingly, I was using a bubble level instead of a square. I'm like, oh, I'm use a bubble level to get the neck straight in the drill press vise and make sure it's, and I didn't even consider that, like, yeah, the bubble levels. And I'm talking to my dad. My dad's like brilliant with woodworking. He's like, well, what are you doing with that? He goes, that's for checking plumb and level. And I'm going, well, what does plumb mean? And it's like, I have this, I'm super guitar focused, and here, my dad, he didn't build the house from scratch here, but almost, it's like he did all the
Wow.
plumbing, all the electrical, he did all the tile, all the woodworking. He's built like probably 80% of the furniture in the house, all the crown molding. And it's like, I grew up watching him do all these things and, working on the cars. And it's like, I've done such a tiny amount. But I just latched onto guitars. I said, man, it would be so useful to know how to do all this, like all this stuff with a house. And I'm like, but, just the other day I was gluing something up and he had one of those corner clamps. I didn't even know how to use it. And I said, here I'm doing all this complicated guitar stuff. And I'm like, hey, how do you, just glue these two pieces of wood together at this right angle? I'm looking at the clamp and I'm like, wait a minute, how does that? So there's a very big, it's so funny because people will say too, like, oh, are you in my pickup testing video, they're like, oh, are you like an electrical engineer? And I said, no. I said,
Yeah.
like, I ask a lot of questions, you know, and part of the reason I make my videos is so I can help people like me that like they need this step by step. Like they're not going to be the kind that's going to figure out intuitively. You know, like I was writing fiction stories and poems when I was a kid, you know. I mean, the guy I learned guitar tech stuff from, he was the kind of toddler that like he took a clock apart and he's, you know, he's putting it back together again at like 3 years old. You know, whereas I had to work very hard, you know, to develop the mechanical skills that I have now. To answer that, taking old videos down. Yeah, like so yesterday I uploaded the new version. It took me about 6 months to redo that video. I was like, I'm like, I want to get it right this time. And then, you know, my process is once I upload it, then I will unlist the old video, because sometimes people put, you know, they'll post my videos and links on forums. So I will upload I'll update the description that just says check description box in all caps, and I'll put a link to the new video. You know, so I won't have a bunch of people, and probably responsible for a couple thousand people now going around using bubble levels the wrong way. I'm like, oh, but, you know, I've had people that were machinists. I'm a machinist for like 20 years, and this video is great. And I said, well, they didn't know about the, you know, of course, to be fair, if your drill press, everything is square to the earth. I checked mine and it was like just kind of cocked to the side, and it's like the actual level on the bubble thing for my drill press is like quite far right of center, and I'm like, uh-oh. I mean, no wonder. I did a couple installations, not a big deal, like a couple on my own guitars where the machine screws would thread in, and I was like, why are these? It's not cross threading, but I'm like, these are kind of, and then I got out the square and I was like, it's just off by like, even like 10 or 15 degrees. And that's when it occurred to me. I said, I got to redo this video, because when I figured that out with the square, I said, and that Raven Moon guy that commented, you know, mentioned, oh, just get the, you know, table square to the chuck. But then I decided to take it a step further, because I was realizing once you clamp that neck heel in a drill press vise, I squared it up to I put a transfer punch in the drill press, you know, to check for square, and that neck heel was not square to the chuck. You know, I mean, it's like you get that radius on the bottom of the frets, and you know, I used to do the Stumac method where they just use a radius call, you know, and you put a radius call upside down and just put it on there, and that does work. But I think for wood screws, you have some leeway. Like it doesn't matter if the holes are they're self-tapping. So it's like, even if you drill your holes off quite a bit off from where they should be, the screw's going to find its way. But when you have an insert and a machine screw, so, you know, funnily enough, I wish I could record everything, because on that topic, I got a comment on that video yesterday where they said, what if you have to shim the neck? And I did a whole response, and I said, well, for bolt-on neck electric guitars, you know, and this made me think of Taylor guitars too. Like, you know, they're all bolt-on necks, and it's like they have their wedge system. So it's like, even though they're threaded inserts and machine screws, they can tolerate some degree of having you know what I mean? Like having a shim, like a wedge shape will kind of offset, but so that's the problem I'm running into this Ovation now. It's a bolt-on neck, 12-string Ovation. The action's insanely high, and I need to reset the neck. So it's like, you know, I'm looking up like, okay, Taylor's shim system. And it's like, yeah, you have a wedge under the fingerboard extension and a wedge under the like tenon joint. I'm like, okay, but when it gets to a point where it has to be so thick, I mean, you eventually are going to run into a point where those machine screws are not going to be able to. So that was a good question that guy asked, but
no doubt,
you know,
and at least it's not negative criticism; it's constructive criticism.
Yeah, and that's the thing too that it's funny, because sometimes people will think I'm offended when I'm like, no, I type really fast and I type a lot, like I think a lot, and like I want to give a thorough response, but it'll seem like, oh man, this really burned this guy up. He just wrote like 5 pages, and I'm like, no, I'm doing it because I'm like, the same way I script out a video. I'm like, I want to cover all of the, so then I don't get bothered really by the, you know, I mean, like any normal person with negative stuff, but the stuff that really gets me is when I'm like, oh my God, I have to redo.
Absolutely. Before other people follow my lead. It's a heavy responsibility when you post tutorials online. A lot of people don't take that into consideration.
Exactly.
And I have to tell you, man, your videos are clearly narrated, which is very helpful, because a lot of dudes, I notice, launch into their how-to videos and don't explain. It's like they leap from step to step in those gray areas in between steps, like what ruler are you grabbing? What tool and why are you doing this? And you know what I mean? Yours are very detailed, laid out, super clear and concise. And I really did appreciate that on that pickup video. But then I have to say, I was looking at all your YouTube videos from, God, like 13, 14 years back. And do you know what your most watched YouTube video is?
No, actually don't.
Do not smoke Mentos.
Oh, really? I remember that. Yep. I actually had no idea. You know, it's funny because I was cleaning up my channel. So I've been on YouTube since 2005, you know, like the year it came out. No, not when it came. It was around like December. I remember, I think the first video I put up was a Voodoo Child. I remember I didn't have a wah pedal at the time, you know. But,
that's right. Yeah.
You know, but yeah, I left that Mentos one up. I said, oh, that was fun making that. And I said, oh, you know, it's cleaning up because I had a lot of other stuff on my channel I unlisted, but I said, oh, that was pretty good. You know, I was going to take some other stuff down, and my friend said, well, it's good to have like kind of posterity on. You see some of these huge people, like you have, what's his name? Paul Davids. You know, I was going through his channel and I just wanted to see, like, what did he upload? Did he leave anything up? And sure enough, he did, like some of his earliest uploads. Okay. So I think that's kind of cool because, you know, I get comments lately. People think I'm an AI, you know, because I go into this YouTube voice when I'm reading my instructions. They're like, get rid of the AI voice. And I've had to tell multiple people. I said, it's not AI. I use this microphone I'm talking into.
That's hilarious, Matt, because I actually thought that too. I'm like, is he plugging his scripts into, because your voice is so clear, concise, even delivery. It's really well done. The narration, very well done. And I was just checking out your YouTube is Guitar MD.
Yep.
And that's your initials, MD, Matt, last name.
Delaferra, yeah.
Delaferra. And then, which is perfect. Guitar MD works out perfectly. Yeah. But your Instagram, because unfortunately someone already grabbed Guitar MD. So your Instagram is Slight Return, which is a tip of the hat to Hendrix. So it's Slight_return. And you have your top post. And I wanted to ask you about this. Speaking of tutorials, and this is going to be a long explanation, I'm sure, because the post is insanely long. You know where I'm going, right?
Yeah,
fret contouring. Well, explain to me the concept, please, of fret contouring.
Right. So, and this is, you know, hats off to my handle on YouTube used to be Slight Return, by the way. I've always used that for, I think I had usernames on my forums and stuff, but yeah, I wanted to grab Guitar MD on YouTube before anybody, because I said that's going to be, that's going to be going. But yeah, hats off to so Big John's Guitars. Now I don't know, now I do. You know, I've talked to him a couple times on Instagram. But years ago, I found his website. It was Big John's Guitars. You know, he's in Denton, Texas. Because I was looking up fretwork. I said there has to be more to this. There's got to be something I'm missing. And simultaneously, you know, Davide Bisoli of Rectify Master, you know, he's an Italian guy, he lives in Japan. And I also found out about his katana and this understring leveling thing probably back in 2010 when he patented it. And, you know, that was from, I don't know if you've ever heard of Sully's Guitar Garage. You know, he was on, I don't know if he's still on YouTube, you know, but he was big back in the day. I used to check out his videos, and he talked about the Rectify Master katana. So I'm prefacing the answer to that question with this, because this is where I owe all the credit to these guys, right? It was Big John's Guitars and, you know, Davide Bisoli, you know, the inventor of Rectify Master, who actually holds the patents on understring leveling tools. You know, I reached out to him. He goes, no, I have. He has them in Japan and the United States. But the thing on Big John's Guitars, right, was he had this concept that he called I think he called it fret or fretboard contouring. And I said, okay, well, that's interesting. And he did have, it was kind of a trade secret thing. So he said, oh, from frets XXXX, you know, like he wouldn't tell you where it was that he was leveling, but he made the point. He goes, the wound strings need more room to vibrate without buzzing, right? They're bigger strings, they vibrate in a wider arc. Now, I will add, again, one caveat is in the Physics of the Electric Guitar. I think it was by Manfred Zollner. It's one of those books. And he actually got into that. And he said, actually, they don't vibrate in a wider arc. He said the higher tension in the, something about the low E string, it actually doesn't. And he said he didn't have an answer for why it's more prone to buzzing then, because it shouldn't, it was something about. So anyway, the stuff that's so complicated. But the general idea, and my friend and mentor, Steve Kubecka, he's described it as, he goes, when I told him about this fret leveling thing, when I started doing this and this contouring based on, John's ideas, Steve worded it as, if you had 6 G strings, like all tuned to the same pitch, it would be, then, leveling everything perfectly flat would make sense. But he goes, the strings are you're going very skinny to very thick at the end. And then, of course, you got to account for string gauge. Like I like the progressive tension theory, where it's kind of like each string gets a tiny bit more. Like on my guitar, I have like an 8, 11, 13 and a half, 22, 30, 42 is usually what I use.
You start out at 8s.
I do, yeah, with my main, and this has been my,
is that the 2 pickup Strat?
It is, yeah, and this is actually...
Dude, that is a phenomenal guitar.
Thanks, and this is my original, this is the first, I remember my dad got me this guitar in 2005, I was like 15 years old. And I wanted a Hendrix type Strat. I'll never get why they call this Arctic white. I mean, Arctic you'd think is like a stark white, but this is like
it's like polar bears have been peeing in the snow.
Exactly right. That's a good. I'm gonna remember that. I said, yeah, it's Arctic if the polar bear's been peeing in the snow. So I said, oh, that's it. I said that's the Woodstock Strat color. I said I want to have that one. And of course, when I got into doing guitar work years and years later, it took me years. But I always wanted that big peg head. And finally, a few years ago, I got one because Mighty Mite didn't have them for the longest time. And
oh wow.
But
does that guitar? Well, that's one of my questions. Since you're pulling it out and taking a look at it, does that guitar have the overwound Strat pickup? And we can talk about that later. But
it does. It does. Okay. Yeah, this has the overwound. I actually recently, this is the latest iteration of it because I said, well, if I'm going to take it that far, why not go farther with it? So I actually recently made a new one with Alnico 8 magnets and then 20,000 turns of 46 gauge wire. I said, why not?
And then that guitar has the fret contouring that we're discussing.
It does.
Okay.
And this is the thing too and one of the reasons I've been hesitant to post about it. Yeah, and I am working on a video. Like I just did this on an American Strat, and like as you could probably tell from the interview so far, it's like my brain is I go all over the place. So it's like if I get in front of a camera. And I'm like trying to do a tutorial, like this might as well be a tutorial on how to level the fret. It's like I just can't. I'll be like, well,
Yeah. Is there? And I hate to ask, but is there a Cliff's Notes version of how fret contouring works?
There is, and this is according to me. I would actually love to contact John from Big John's Guitars and see if I could find out how he does it because that's where I got the idea.
Okay.
But I didn't, because he didn't list how he did it. I just kind of surmised because he said something about like he called it like fret profiling. So you're not getting them level. He goes, well, and the way it works, he said, is like when you bring the relief back into the neck, he goes, your plain strings, the neck's going to be dead straight as a laser beam. And then under the wound strings, you're going to have this, kind of relief. So I surmised from that, the idea of carving relief into the frets themselves. Now,
so it's almost like doing a fallout on the higher frets, but taking in mind the entire fingerboard and frets on the low 3 strings, the round strings,
and primarily
all the way across the neck.
Yeah, and primarily the E and the A. Like now, and funnily enough, my friend and mentor Steve K. I've told him about this, and that's a whole nother story. I mean, I learned how to level frets with a Nicholson hand file. I mean, it was like 10 years before I even knew that people used full-length beams to level. I was trained super old school, like how he was doing it in the late 60s.
Wow. Whoa.
Like a 6-inch, like to 8-inch hand file. I said, well, they said this is really hard, but He's actually, because I've told him about this. Like I was posting on TDPRI, I think back in 2019, when I had the idea for the carving relief into the frets specifically under the low E and the A string. And you know, if you do Google searches on it too, I said other people are having this problem. They said, "What's going on?" Like I leveled the frets, I did it exactly the way you're supposed to, and then I string it up. Everything's working perfect, but the low E string's buzzing, and it's buzzing on like every fret. And they're like, "What's?" So the way Steve has done it, because he doesn't. I do it with a katana, you know, the Rectify Master Katana, which is basically it's a full length beam and it has a truss rod in it. So it's an aluminum leveling beam, but you can adjust. You can actually make it convex. So when you go to take that convex curvature and you level the frets, you're carving in that concave relief into the frets themselves.
Okay.
And now this is so for the low E side, and I do it under the E and the A strings. So the way I do it,
and that's why you suggest to give the neck a slight back bow before you begin the procedure.
And that's what I was doing. So the way that you can do it is basically if you have a straight leveling beam, I was tightening the truss rod, you know, to get the neck into a slight back bow, and then leveling, you know, and literally a couple thousandths, you know, because as you know, it's like a couple thousandths in the world of frets is like that's going to look like you're taking off a lot of. I'm still shocked by that to this day. Like I have my
goes a long way.
Yeah, and it's like I measure the frets, and it's like, man, like 2 thousandths is like way more than even after all these years of leveling frets. I'm still amazed. I'm like, really? That's only 2 thousandths off the top. It's like it looks like you know, hogged off a whole lot of it. Yeah, and you know, hopefully he doesn't mind me sharing it. This guy in the official Luthier forum, I was on there very briefly. I think his name's Hesh Breakstone. You know, he works with David Collins at I think it's Ann Arbor Guitars in Michigan. And he mentioned that, he goes, oh, this is one of David Collins' ideas. He goes, for years, he's been doing this, you know, he has like a fulcrum under the neck around like the 7th fret area, and he'll manually press it down headstock end with his hand into a back bow and then just go over. Wow. And so, you know, of course, my post was like, you know, 10 pages long. So my method kind of got lost in the mix there. The first post I made on the forum was to share my idea about back bowing the neck with the truss rod, like tightening the rod and then leveling. Makes sense. I mentioned using the katana as well. So, I mean, I started doing that, I think about 2019. There's some post, you know, on TDPRI where I made one about it, but it's been about 6 years. And I was thinking like 100th monkey effect, if you ever heard of that. Like, you know, it's kind of like metalworking stuff in history where places over the globe that had no contact with each other all started doing similar things at the same time.
Yeah, right. Because we're tapping into that energy. That's and it begs the question. So you're a guitar tech. Customers bring you guitars for different services. Do you have that listed? Do you have a website that points to your services?
I don't yet, you know, I almost, you know, I'm getting, you know, some more work through YouTube and whatnot, but it's funny that, people around here, it's like I've gotten more work through Steve because like everybody knows him. And I've kind of been, you know, taking the opportunity to really refine my skills a lot. And
so how would anyone be able to request that? Like, hey, dude, I saw this YouTube video, and that'd be the only way that you're not suggesting it to clients. Like, hey, have you ever thought about fret contouring? I mean, because then that just blow their mind wide open, and
it would
they'd probably say no.
Right, and you know the thing too, and I actually had a guy that because you know I'm in Connecticut. You know, I had a guy message me on my email account, you know, from Brooklyn, and he wanted to drive up here. And you know, I am so critical of my work, and it's like this has been going on for years. You know, I used that contouring technique for Steve. You know, he's really big on reverb. He has a ton of vintage guitars, and he does appraisals. Like people will go to him. I mean, he's like the man. You know, I mean, I wish he could be here right now on the interview because I mean, it is just I know it's another tangent, but he started his career working for Dan Armstrong in 1968.
Wow.
You know, so he was about probably 17 at the time, or so. He was born in 1950. You know, so I mean, he's been around for a while.
Are you a member of the Luth group?
I want to join. You know, it's like I know I have heard of it, and I'm like, oh, that would be great to. People keep talking about it, you know, and I see him. I know like Doug Proper. I mean, I watch his stuff on Instagram all the time.
Sure.
And I mean, that's like a whole nother it's not that far away either. You know, I mean, I know I was telling
Right.
Steve, I said, maybe we could take a ride down there. And because Steve's kind of I know someone had described him once. He said he's like, you're like a big fish in a small pond, you know, because it's like, I mean, he's had crazy experiences. I mean, even as a guitarist, like he did a small tour with Buddy Miles, you know, it's like he was out. And it's just, and, you know, and it's funny because he doesn't like to name drop stuff. Like he'll tell me this stuff, but then people ask him, and it's like, you know, he was working like backstage as a tech with like AC/DC and all these other bands, and but he doesn't tell people because he's like, oh, I want to go by the merit of my work. He's like, I don't need to tell people, you know. So it's like,
so the work you're doing is some of Steve's stuff that he sends to you.
oh yeah, like he'll get, you know, he'll send me stuff that and he's right down the road from me, you know, he's like 10 minutes away, so I'll stop over there all the time, you know, but he doesn't wind pickups anymore. He used to, you know, but he doesn't have a setup for it. So it's like he'll usually send me this stuff, like a lot, like pick guards and pickups, like the stuff that he's not currently set up to do.
That leads me to my next question, if you don't mind, Matt. And I was going to ask about, you have an eBay store and you sell the overwound single coil Strat pickup.
Yep.
So I was going to ask, are you thinking about diving into other pickup models, humbuckers, you know, full on 3 sets with a neck, middle, and a bridge, wound specifically for those positions? And if you do pick guards, you could, you know, or have you thought about full harnesses, full setups onto a pick guard and plop it right into a 11 screw Strat?
I have, you know, it's funny because you know, I know the guy I learned from, again, from the TDPRI forum, you know, his name, Rob DiStefano of Cavalier Pickups.
Can you please tell me what TDPRI is?
Oh yeah, it's the it's actually funny. I forgot it was a Telecaster. I actually don't know. I forgot. It's a Telecaster.
I'll look it up. TDPRI.
It's funny. I've been on there for like 10 years and I don't, because I'm a Strat player, you know, but it's a Telecaster forum, you know.
Oh,
so
gotcha.
you know, so it's funny that I do own a Telecaster that I put together. You know, I did a lot of work on it. I mean, really nice, you know. But yeah, the because he's been running Cavalier pickups for ages, and I've seen, you know, he was trying to encourage me. He's like, you know, even if you make like a Junker GoDaddy website, he goes, just anything. He's like, something. I am all over the place with stuff, and I do like the variety of things. You know, that's been my main hesitation of really diving in. You know, Steve told me when he worked for Dan kind of had this thing. Steve would call it the idea of the week. You know, because Dan would be all over the place. I mean, he said he would just be. And he made that, you know, the clear lucite guitars, you know, that was Dan's invention. And he did that orange squeeze, I think, compressor and like a million other things. You know, he came up with like that super Strat wiring, and he was just constantly, and apparently he was a very accomplished bassist. You know, he said, Steve said he was like phenomenal. Part of the hesitation and, you know, with the pick guards as well, like I actually did have someone reach out to me, and, part of the difficulty is I really struggle to even charge book value on things. And I've kind of run into this situation where it's like I've lowballed my prices for so long that I just started burning out, where it's like, I just can't do this for this low of a, you know,
sustainability. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really tough with pick guards. Like I actually have, I don't know when I'm going to publish it. It's scheduled to upload, but it's over an hour long. And I decided to just use workshop audio, and I made a mountain of subtitles, you know, like with instructions on every step of the way, but it's on cutting pick guards, you know, copying pick guards and cutting them, every single tool that I use, and like literally down to, you know, I get my macro lenses out and I got super close-ups of the router bits and everything. And it's really hard to explain to people. You basically can't. I'm like, why? I was even burning out. It's like if I was doing a pick guard for like $70, you know, with like free shipping, and I'm like, but here it's like it's costing me $25 for the material, and then it's taking me like 3.5, 4 hours to make the thing. And I'm like, it can be very nerve-wracking work, like especially when you're making a copy of a pick guard that someone still wants to use, and like, well, I don't damage it, you know. And it's like, oh, I mean, it's so difficult. And, you know, like the loaded pick guards, I guess one of the reasons I do the pick guard copies is because the only way I can guarantee a perfect fit is copying the pick guard that's already on there. You know, and people are used to it. There's like $10 Amazon pick guards, so they're used to, okay, you got to plug the holes and maybe file it down a bit. It's funny, in line with me, I think I had some innate mechanical ability, but even to this day, like with Steve, it's like he'll get a pickguard that doesn't fit and he'll know exactly where he has to take the material off. He's like, oh, it's a little off here. And he'll just take a hand file and it's like, put it back in and it's perfect. And even to this day, it's like, I will try to do that. And then I'll screw something up or I'll have a little gap and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I just can't. So, you know what I mean? So for me, like the templates were like Steve will freehand route stuff and it'll look immaculate.
Wow.
Like I can do that to an extent. Like I've done my share, but even with freehand routing, I think it's easier on the router table. You get two hands on it and you're moving it into the, versus using like a flex shaft, like on a Dremel or a Fordham tool and you're,
Yikes. Yeah.
So, which I have done plenty of times, but I mean, it's just one of those things where, like, I just installed these jazz bass pickups recently where they didn't fit. It was like an Austin bass and the Seymour Duncans didn't fit and they were off the jazz bass just a little bit.
Yeah.
And I said, I could freehand it. I said, I'm just going to double stick tape the template down and just use the template because I don't want to risk messing it up. So I'm like a template guy where I'm like, I want to, so that's part of the hesitation with the, the loaded pick guards, for example, would be, it's so difficult, like especially with Strat pick guards, in that little switch slot, like the way I do it. And I'm curious what some of these major manufacturers, like, I don't know. I mean, I would assume they're doing some amount of CNC, like you can just program it and cut it out because doing it by hand is like, oh my God, it's so involved. And then, I've told people too, I think, because again, most people are going to hear even like 70 for a pick guard or even then I would charge. And then I felt like at 50, I'm like, I'm just giving them, it's costing me $25 from the material and I'm spending like 3-4 hours making it. Like, what am I walking away with? It's like, maybe
very
25
yourself.
Yeah. And it's like, but then, to justify that to people where I know, I forget his name. It was that Eddie something. He was out in Vegas. It was Eddie's Guitars or something, but he said people had complained because it's like 10 years ago. He was charging people like $1.50 for doing pickguard copies. And I'm like, yeah, but it's for the amount of work that, especially custom options. Right. I've had some pickguards that I literally probably spent about 15 hours on over the course of a few days, like just to by hand, do a conversion. Like it was like, oh, can you convert this, say somebody wants a, dead nuts copy of a pickguard like this. And like, well, I want that to be a humbucker here. It's like, I just get obsessive with it because most people are just going to, I could put like a, trace it, put a template over it and just be done with it. And it's not that hard, but I said, well, for me,
so basically it's a giant can of worms that you just do not want to open.
It is. And like, I guess even on the easiest level of it, I kind of like offering stuff. I could do that on a limited basis. This is kind of why I haven't, to answer the pickup question. Like I've made humbuckers, in the past, like I've done 7-string humbuckers a couple times. I have my own kind of proprietary. It was basically like a Duncan Stag Mag, but I got the magnets flush with the top. They're all the same height. And then I actually had a metal base plate originally it was actually a fiberboard base plate that I like super glued these, nuts on either side for mounting. But then I went to a base plate and I actually drilled out the holes on the back oversized. So I said, if somebody wanted to take like a chopstick, you could actually stagger the magnets yourself. Like you could take the pickup out and press the Alnico magnets up or down, where you want them. Wow. Yeah, and I thought it was just so difficult. I'm like, oh man, I had to make a jig for like drilling out the base plates, and it would be like, I could make one of these pickups. I mean, it might take me like hours, and humbuckers too. I actually haven't published this video yet. I don't know if you've heard of that Brad, the Guitologist. He has a YouTube channel. Yeah, like he reached out to me last year, and I haven't. I think it just kind of went. I haven't heard from him in over a year now, but I also didn't message him again. He sent me a 1977 Gibson T-top humbucker that he wanted me to rewind. He goes, "Oh, saw your videos," and he's like, "Oh, the video looked really good. Can you, So I have the video's about a half an hour long. I never published it, and I probably finished it like sometime last year, and then I think he said, well, it'd be good to wait because he wants to like sync everything up. But he's like, well, you can publish it, whenever you want, and then I'll kind of figure out. So I don't know what to. It's kind of been hanging out there for a while, but that was a kind of foray into humbucker winding. where I was like, man, I mean, even in the simplest format, you know, those, especially for conductor, I said, it's like a, you know, to me, I mean, it's a pretty big endeavor for me. It's like I've wound plenty of them, but I'm like, man, it's very finicky work. And it's like, kind of like cutting a bone nut where it's like, I can do that. And it's like, it's so draining. It's like, I could do one and I'm like, I need to take a nap or something. You know, it's like, and really what it is, I think more because I have that spacing video where I feel like I did, you know, figure out the, you know, like a really good method for just banging out nut slot spacing, like perfect spacing, just, you know, within a couple minutes.
That was another video that I really liked of yours, was the methodology of string spacing on nuts that you posted. And you said, I've been doing this for so many years. It's foolproof and it's super smart. I really, in fact, I'm going to go out and get one of those T-square angles that you're using.
Oh yeah.
It's a phenomenal method.
Yeah. And
phenomenal method.
And, you know, I'm actually redoing that video too, to be, you know, because I made a couple errors in it where I showed like I was 64ths of an inch, but I showed 32nds of an inch on the ruler.
Oh, okay.
That was a mistake. And I actually redid a couple of the graphics to be better. And I think the new video will just be a better, you know, more streamlined. I have some better shots with my camera I got, and I did the graphics. I also laid things out, I think, in a little, like when I transitioned to 12 string guitars. Because that was actually the original thing that really sealed the deal when I was like, I have to figure this out. It was one from Steve. You know, he's like, hey, can you cut a nut for this? I got a customer, because I know you're really good with these. But this is before I figured out this method. And it was a 12 string bass, and I had never seen one before.
You showed that on that. Yeah, I've never seen one before either.
And I actually had to look it up on Google because it was so bad that I said, are the strings supposed to be all evenly apart? Because I'm like, what? And I looked it up and I said, no, they're in triplets. You know, they're 3, 6, 9, 12. And I looking at the nut that was on there, you'd never know because they were all like an equal. It was like
insane.
How do you?
It's insane.
Yeah. So and I said,
what brand name was that bass?
Oh man, I wish I could remember. I don't know if it actually even had a brand on the headstock. I just remember I was standing it up next to a vacuum cleaner, and it was taller than the thing was almost as tall as I was. I had it stood up, and I'm like standing up, and the headstock was coming up almost to my head. I was like, wow. But it was yeah, I remember that's when I figured it out with the feeler gauges, because originally I was using the and I want to in the new video too, one of the reasons I want to redo it is to clarify that really what I came up with was simply nothing more than, using the caliper jaws as a fence for the nut file, using the double square as a fence for the nut file, and then the feeler gauges in the nut slots. Like the way I think of it is like, with that double square, like if you're cutting lumber, like imagine you got a bandsaw and now you take a piece of lumber, you put your double square on it, you draw a pencil line up and down the length of it.
Right.
To me, it's like, and then you go and cut it out freehand on a bandsaw versus like you set up the cut you want to make and you set it on a fence and you, now it's a dramatic example, but like, again, with my kind of difficulty with mechanical stuff, Steve had a method where I learned to cut nuts by eye. He never measured anything. He never used a rule. Like he would always, and the way I was trained was to lay them out by eye, and he'd hold it up and look at it from this angle, that angle. He'd put it down on the bench and look at it from back here. And once he got the strings laid out where he wanted them, he would mark either side of each string with a pencil, and then he'd put like his thumbnail in the middle of those two pencil lines, and he actually would use his thumbnail as a fence. Yeah,
old school.
He'd use his thumbnail as a fence for an X-Acto razor saw, and he'd cut the line right in the middle of that. So, and I was doing it that way for years, and I said I made a lot of really good nuts, but it was very difficult. And then 12 strings were just like a nightmare. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Whereas with this method, and that's part of the reason I wanted to redo the video, is to clarify that there could be a multitude of mathematical formulas that would work. Like I didn't come up with that formula, I found it. It's a very common one. And you get people that, I hate equidistant spacing. I like the center to center, or they like the proportional spacing like Stu Mack has. And even Steve called me up like a couple months ago. He goes, hey, he's not to, I don't want to burst your bubble here, but he goes, I had a customer over and we watched your video. He said it was great. He's like, oh, it's brilliant. But he said, the E and the A string looked kind of far apart. And he said, sure enough, they were exactly the same space. It's equidistant. It's within 1,000th of an inch. Visually, they look, because of the width of the strings, however it works, it's like you'll do it perfect. And I have it with calipers. You can get it within 1,000th of an inch. but the E and the A, he's like, oh, they kind of. So I forget what formula he came up with, but he said he did it a little different, and he got the. It could probably be, who knows, similar to the StewMac proportional spacing, where they kind of base it on the string center to center spacing, but they kind of space it out. So I am not. I did want to clarify in that new video I'm working on. You can use any formula. I said, if you can do the math and you can figure it out, you can, my method is simply the idea of using the calipers as a fence. And then, once you make your spacing to double check it. So to me, it's like, that's really all I came up with. It's like, it's like really the idea of just foolproofing, because when you're cutting a pencil line and cutting over that pencil line, I kind of think of that lumber on a bandsaw thing where, because I did it in the past. Like I would try to cut right over that line, but inevitably it would be off by 10, 15 thousandths.
Exactly. And that begs the question: are you a millimeters guy or an inches guy?
So I am like dead set in inches, just because I learned again from like Steve. He always had his dial calipers out, and everything was in. I got very used to actually decimal inches. So like I get confused sometimes by fractional because I don't. And it's funny, my dad uses fractional with woodworking all the time. And I'm like, I can't compute. It's funny that in the machining world, I think there is a good argument. I've actually been thinking this for a while, that with thousandths of an inch, metric wins, when you get to higher resolution measurements, because once you go beyond 1,000th, I'm like, I've never heard anybody, this is 1/10,000. You can say that, or 1/100,000. Right. But like to me, 3,000ths versus like this point, blah, 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 millimeters. Like, on the calipers, the way I see it, like with the nut spacing video, I'm like, it's either way. It has a button for conversion. So you're going to have two numbers, a decimal and two numbers, whichever one you use.
There you go.
But I have a friend that really prefers metric. And I kind of agree that it's kind of whatever you get used to, you're going to be most comfortable with. But I know that the consensus among some machinists is like, it's helpful to actually be able to go back and forth between them. Like now I've got it locked into my head that I learned the, like on my Strat, I have the action super low. Like I like my GB and E strings at 30 thousandths at the 12th fret, which is like 0.75 millimeters. And, I just remembered that because I didn't know the millimeters. And I'm like, okay, it's 0.75 or 0.72 and I will say, because I did want to, actually the fret contouring thing is so interesting. I didn't want to abandon the, the simple, because I can sum it up very simply. And one of the reasons I actually don't offer it is because with the action this low, it's like I can't bend like 30 thousandths at the 12th fret. And I originally did this as like a 7.25 to 10 compound radius, which is pretty, that's pretty curvy. So I said it's at some point, and this new video I'm working on, which is just, it's like it's going to be a bit more free form, like it's just me at the bench talking about stuff. So I might take a while to elucidate the points, but this concept, I kind of coined this term I call LRA, which is lowest reasonable action.
Okay.
So that's what I thought about this as like, there needs to be a standard for fret work. Like basically, even if the person wants the action relatively high, like when you're leveling the frets, like to evaluate the quality of the fret work, it's like, I feel like they should be able to perform at this lowest reasonable action, right? Where basically,
makes sense.
And I define that generally as like a whole step bend. I think when you start going beyond a whole step, not a lot of people are doing that. I mean, it's kind of, I do, but it's kind of like, there is going to be a point where, how do you want the guitar to perform? Like, if you're like, I want to be able to bend the high E string to like where the D string is and not have it choke out. It's like, well, you're going to have to, either severely flatten the radius, or, what I mean? There's going to be compromises.
Right. So like, and that's another great video of yours is how to do compound radiuses.
Oh yeah.
But as soon as admittedly, and I herald you for your technical savvy because you get into the numbers and you clearly explain it. But as soon as that freaking formula comes up on the screen, I bail out. Yep. And I'm sure if you looked at the YouTube algorithm, no offense, but I'm sure that's where everyone, that's like probably a sheer drop off.
No offense taken at all. I mean, it's funny for me because like I referred to that StewMac with Don McRosty, like where he came up with that formula. Like I never in a million years would ever. And, it's like, again, this is kind of my compulsion with making videos because I don't even use that really that often. I mean, it's kind of like I was just doing enough, like what I've gone to now
Yeah.
I think it was kind of like a worm in my brain that I'm like, I just got to make this video to explain, because it is very complicated, you know. And I think the reality of it is, the Cliff Notes version is like, if you just level along the string paths, you're going to end up with a conical profile, which is what that formula basically describes as just a section of a cone.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
you know, and this is the challenge with my videos, because I'm always trying to, because I actually do get overwhelmed by stuff like that myself. I was like, I couldn't believe, like, I was probably working on that video for over a year, and I'm like, I'm in I'm in like Krita. Krita is the vector editing, and it's kind of like it's a free like Photoshop basically. It's Krita. You know, this thing, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And but anyway, you know, I was doing all the graphics and that and the text, and I'm like writing out all the formulas, and I'm like, I was just like, oh my God, this is like insane. So I said, once I posted it, I said, great, I'll never have to think about this ever again. I'll never have to look at the formula again. So that's, you know, so in line with the fretboard contouring thing, and this is why it takes me so long to make videos, because it's like I'm taking these very complicated ideas, but the reality is, again, the whole brevity is the soul of wit. It's not really that complicated.
Right.
It seems like it, but like, so basically, you know, I had the realization that why does the high E string choke out and your other strings aren't, right? And it's like, well, the string rides along the fret as you're bending it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So what is action? Action is the distance between the bottom of the string and the top of the fret. So it's like, if you're bending that high E string, your saddle's in a fixed position, and as it's riding along the fret, your action is effectively getting lower, because your fret is getting taller as it approaches the peak.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, that's where I realized, like, okay, to facilitate bending on the high E string, like, let's see, on the 15th fret, you know, here we're 17th fret. You know, when I bend that up, and I used to bend the string, and I'd make a little Sharpie mark where it is so I could see it. And it's like, you're right outside of that, you know, 15th fret marker. Yeah. And it's like, if you leave your finger there, it's like, it's really basically, guess what is right outside of that 15th fret marker is the plane of the G string. So the contouring idea, and this is where I started with fall away. The way I do it, I kind of had this realization, when you are trying to facilitate bending on the high E string and get rid of that choking out, if you're not having any problems on the straight notes, like you're playing up and down straight notes on the high E and it sounds perfect, do not level under that string. You know, like when people do fall away, the traditional thing is you go the whole thing 12 to the end. But what you're doing when you level the frets under the high E string, back to that action example, you know, you're lowering the height of the frets, you're increasing your action. Now you've got to bring the saddle down, and now you've just defeated the purpose of doing the fall away. So, you know, so to me, it's like, if you, for the leveling, for facilitating the high E string bending, and this is why I call it like fretboard profiling. You know, I didn't want to steal Big John's term of contouring, so I said, well, it's like fret profiling, because really, and sometimes I'll even start up here. You're effectively flattening the radius, but you're not really doing a full compound radius. It's almost like an offset trapezoid, because you're not like, why would I take, if I'm trying to facilitate bending on the high E string, you know, I mean, you could get crazy if you're doing these Albert King bends. You're like, well, I want to bend three whole steps. And it's like, well, then you're going to have to level under the D string. But you know what I mean? The plane that the high E string sees as it's bending, that's what you want to relieve. You know, it's basically leave the surface under the E string alone, because you want to maintain that fret height, because anytime you're lowering the fret height, you've got to bring the saddle down to get the same action you had before. So basically, and I have found that I've come to prefer the same action on the G, B, and E. Like that's how I like my setups, is I'll set them exactly to the same height. And, you know, when you do that, it's funny when you have the realization, it's like, okay, let's say they're all 30 thousandths or 40 thousandths open at the 12th fret, but then your G string saddle's way up here, you know, your B, because the peak of that radius. So it's all so simple. And I'm like, you know, when I have these realizations, like, oh, what is fretboard radius? It's like, well, 9.5-inch radius. You take a circle, like imagine you have a compass, you set it to 9.5, you draw a circle. Now that circle is going to have a 19-inch diameter. And now you just think of it like the radius just means they just cut a little piece off of that circle, and they're taking that curvature and copying it, you know, so like 1.7 inches at the beginning and whatever at the end, 2.3. You know, but I had that realization when it's like, it is a cone. It's like you're going from narrow to wide. And it's my basic process with the understring leveling. It's actually very simple. You know, it's the same idea as leveling, with the strings off, but like I'll get the guitar on the bench, and leveling in the playing position is a whole nother thing. I mean, you can do that. I don't personally think it's that necessary, but I'll lay the guitar flat. I use my G-Tech Guitars digital neck relief gauge. That is, by the way, that's like one of my favorite. I think that is one of the most underrated tools. That thing is awesome. That digital neck relief gauge.
Yes.
Like I zeroed it out like one time. Oh, this one, the one from eBay that I had. I know. Really? I did just get Doug Proper's that just came out.
Yeah.
But for the past few years, I've been using the one from G-Tech Guitar Works on eBay.
Oh, okay.
You just bang it. It's so fast. It's like literally, it's like 3 seconds. I got the measurement, put it back in.
Nice.
It has a zero memory.
The neck heel. I see another video that I was watching. You contoured your neck heel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That Fender is so specced out to you. Is that your total go-to guitar now? And you wish you had more, probably?
Oh, yeah. Well, it is like, I'm a very, I don't know, like I'm like a guitar monogamist or something. It's like, because I have, but I do have one of each. It's like a split between. It's like, well, it's like in that sense, I'm very faithful to each guitar. But I like having like one guitar for every specific.
Sure.
Like this is my 6-string electric. And it's funny that I do have my Telly that I don't play, but that one has a wound G string on it, and I like to play more slide on it.
Gotcha.
So it's like even having a 6-string setup with a wound G is like, to me it's like I play it differently than a plain.
So when you grab a conventional guitar from the factory, it probably drives you nuts.
Oh yeah, I mean, well that's like with the Strat, of course I got my fretless SG that I just put this. I actually got this from a customer years ago. He left it here. He's like, "Oh, you can have it. It's a no-name Bigsby." Because this was having a neck dive to it, and I said, it would probably help the neck dive a lot is putting the Bigsby on the end, and sure enough, it did. It totally.
And the slide the slide you play with is like a ring slide, right? Is that what I noticed?
Yeah, I use a bunch of different. I have like a regular. I actually keep them on my guitar stands. This is a great trick. Like you put them on the end of the guitar stand. These will slip right over. Like you have your guitar stand, the little U shape. These will the slide slip. So yeah, the slide winder ring is one of them, and I really like that.
And your videos are people should check out your music because you are, like I said, a phenomenal player. Which leads me to a question that I wrote down here on my list. Are you in any bands, or do you play with anybody on a regular basis?
I did. So, and it's funny, I wanted to for the longest time, and I did, from, I would say, that was like a high point in my life. I think it was like 2015. I mean, this was like, so 10 years ago, and this was like the first girlfriend I had. I'm like, things were going great. And then I got into like my first real band where we're playing out. I started playing guitar at about 15, so it was pretty much around 25, 26 years old. It's like I was a bit of a late start, but it was like, back when I was in high school, it's like, oh, I wanted a girlfriend and I wanted to be in a band, and then it just took about 10 years for that to,
Which begs the question, did the band, it's like the chicken before the egg, did the band come before the girlfriend? Or
it came after. It came after the.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. It is kind of funny. I always used to make the joke. They said, "Oh, well, guitar will help you get women." I said, "Well, nobody told me you had to leave your room." I said, "You can't just sit there and play." And I'm looking out the window.
Yeah, that's
like,
right.
well, I'm not seeing any. I'm not seeing any women out there. I said, "Can I turn it up a little bit? Maybe you have to play better." I said. So after about 10 years of doing that, I finally figured out the.
You got to go play live, right?
Yeah, but yeah, I did play out when I was young. Like in high school, I played with a drummer, and he kind of stiffed me because I wasn't, I was kind of a loner. I wasn't unpopular, but I kind of kept to myself. So he was like, "Well, I'm going to get with these other guys," and so when he did that, that was actually a blessing in disguise for me because I was big into Hendrix and back at that age, this is back around like 2005 or so, and here I am at like 15, and like they didn't want to play Hendrix. It's like they wanted to do the kind of modern music of the.
Sure.
So that's when I discovered Leo Kottke, and then I was like,
nice.
hey, wait a minute. I'm like, and I heard I heard Vaseline Machine Gun, and I was like, I've got to figure this out.
Phenomenal guitar song. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So like, and that was and that became my go-to.
I sort of does Leo use an alternate tuning on that song?
Oh yeah, yep. So
because it sounds so freaking loose and slinky, that tune.
It is. So I always do everything by intervals. That's like, to me, like on a guitar, even if it's tuned down a couple whole steps, if I'm playing at the 5th fret, like a minor pentatonic, I'm like, oh, it's A minor. Like in my brain, that's how I think of it. You know what I mean? I think of it relative to the frets. So similarly with open. Yeah. So similar to open tunings, I think of them like, Vaseline Machine Gun is an open G. But Leo started out on that album. He tunes down 2 whole steps, so it's like he's starting out in C standard, right off the bat. So like, but again, thinking about it as intervals, it's like Busted Bicycle's open C, Tennessee Toad is open C, Vaseline Machine Gun, Jack Fig, Sailor's Grave on the Prairie, those are all open G.
So if you've ever seen him live, have you seen him live?
I've seen him twice. I saw him when he was with Mike Gordon, and then I saw him. It was down in actually White Plains, New York, when I was like 18 or 19. I just missed him. He's out here in Connecticut. It was actually, I think, I missed the tickets because it's coming up, but they sold. It was like initially it was like $40, and it was it was like April. He's going to be playing in like 10 minutes down the road from me.
Wow. Yeah. So he's switching out guitars because they're all tuned to different tunings. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do know, and I was as obsessed with Leo Kottke as I was with Jimi Hendrix. Like, it was really, I think of my guitar influences, and people say, I've listened to a lot of different music, but I was like Jimi Hendrix and Leo Kottke. It was like spent like pretty much my entire, adolescence watching like the Woodstock. I got every Hendrix DVD and bootleg I could get my hands on. And same with Leo Kottke. I found all these live recording. I would find all this obscure stuff, and I put it into my DAW or Audacity at the time, which isn't really an official DAW, but like, and I would slow it down, loop it, and I'm just listening. And that's where I have, like, on my channel, on my YouTube channel, I have a Vaseline Machine Gun tutorial where I just lay out how to play the whole thing. Beginning to end.
And Machine Gun.
Oh yeah, yep. Oh yeah, we got the Vaseline Machine Gun, and then the Hendrix
Machine Gun. And you know what? It's cool because you're playing the Band of Gypsies Machine Gun. Yeah, they're from the album Band of Gypsies. There's another version out there, and last night I was thinking about our talk. Have you ever heard the other version where the security walkie-talkie system starts coming in over the PA system?
I don't think so.
No, dude, I'm going to send you a link to it because knowing that he was trying to emulate a soldier's struggle during combat, that suddenly the security are like, and it's coming over the PA, and it's so,
oh my God.
So serendipitous. It really adds to it. I'll send you that version.
I got to check that out because, man, that's, the Winterland box set. There was one, and I can't find it, but there was just one moment, and it was like the craziest thing I've ever heard. It was, I think, Mitch Mitchell. It was either Noel or Mitch that went out a little bit. Like someone dropped the ball on something, right? Like they're playing it, and the whole thing just fell apart. But it was but it was literally, when I say fell apart, it was like, it's almost like you started falling down a staircase, but then you caught yourself.
Okay.
Because like what happened was you could hear Hendrix. It was, I wish I could find this, but it was like, the drums are going out, and Noel just either stopped playing or played a wrong, something happened, but Hendrix was in the middle of a solo. He did not miss a beat. Like, he held the note that he was playing and did something where it was like, he did not stop for a second. It's like he slowed down what he was playing and kind of like did this, he hit like a lower note and up like that. And it was like literally within the space of about 3 seconds, it went from like, this is completely derailed to like the right back into the,
oh, wow.
Yeah, he like dipped in and like picked them up. Both got like the drums and the bass back on. Mitch and Hendrix were just locked in like this, but But yeah, with the Leo Kottke stuff on the opposite side, which is funny. I remember him saying once, because he got used to, like I did, the acoustic stuff playing alone. But I do love playing with other people. Like I got very much into like doing solo. I did a couple open mic. I didn't do a ton, it's like even like Lifetime. It's like I probably only played out solo 12 string maybe like 10 times. Wow. Great experience every time. It would just make me so nervous that like, even though it would go great, I'm like, oh my God, this is exhausting. Whereas now I'm a little bit more lax about, I guess you get
Sure.
older, you play enough gigs, and it's like, yeah, it's,
Right.
people, they're sitting there, they're on their phone or talking to their, friends or something. It's
Right.
not like a huge deal. But yeah, and playing with people, some of my favorites was jams. Like I was in a band, we did a lot of, I got them doing a lot of Hendrix covers. They loved it.
Nice.
They're older than
Nice.
me, like they were about,
Nice.
like I was in my 20s at the time. They were in like their late 30s, early 40s. And like, they were
Okay.
really into the, we would do like some Allman Brothers, or like in memory of Elizabeth Reed. We got that one
Nice.
down really well. And
Nice.
Voodoo Child, Purple Haze, Bold as Love. We're doing like some
Mhm.
Neil Young, like Rockin' in the Free World,
Mhm.
Cinnamon Girl, all the
Mhm.
Roadhouse
Mhm.
Blues and the Doors. And we did Peace Frog. That's when you don't hear too much.
Love Peace Frog.
Playing out it is great. I mean, I forget the last time I did go to some jam thing. I like those a lot, where you could just bring your guitar and kind of no pressure. You just hop up and, one of my favorites was this little private music festival. It was like in a state forest, and they used to have it every year. And it would be like, there'd be like only like 30, 40 people, sometimes 60, 70, but very small. The guy brewed his own beer. So you'd make like these, you'd have like 10 different kegs of beer to pick flavors from. And oh yeah, do lights and everything. It was like a little festival, and very all jam bands. I mean, you could just go up and we'd jam. It would be like 2 o'clock in the morning to like 5. And it was like,
awesome.
It was awesome. But yeah, playing out, they did the band thing for a few years. It was really when COVID hit, where I was kind of like, I mean, it was like, we're still, meeting up for band practice, but then the place, it was a different band I got into, because the drummer moved. The drummer, he was great. And, the bass player still wanted to play with me, but the new band, how it is, like you could have like some really great players. I said this bass player was phenomenal. The drummer's great, but it just wasn't working. I just don't know what it was. It was like, I mean, I could get along with them and they really liked my playing, but I wasn't really into the songs they were doing, and it kind of felt, and plus it was an hour drive. So it was like, I'm an hour there and an hour back. And then I was like, is this really, how it kind of is funny to get disillusioned with, it's kind of actually similar. It's funny you mentioned like with pickup winding, on a tangent on that. It kind of, I was like, oh, I'm going to make some incredible, like, and then I was kind of like, well, I mean, it sounds pretty much like I expected it to, I said like, so that's one of the reasons I've kind of selected I want to make something really unique. One of the reasons, like I've kind of laser focused on, well, strap pickups are also easier. They're easier to make than like the telly with the base plate on it. It's that there's so many extra steps, but, having something that is super distinct, where like, there's going to be no question, it's not for everyone, but like someone takes one of those pickups I make, it's not going to be like a strap pickup you've heard before. I mean, it's so ridiculously overwhelmed that I'm like, some people might hate it, but I'm like, the people that are looking for that sound.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And I've thought about that with neck pickups too, actually. And I did make sets before, and it's funny that it was just
overwound neck pickups.
Underwound neck pickups.
Underwound to get a mellower. Okay.
Yeah, and I've done a fair amount of vintage rewinds, for, again, through Steve, he has a friend that has a very nice collection of, like vintage guitars. It's really crazy stuff. Like I remember I recently, or last year, I did a couple for this guy, it was an original 1951 Nocaster. And then he had like an original 1955 Strat. Then there was a 65 Strat. I think it was maybe a 69. It was the one on my channel. I did a kind of a Hendrix medley with footage of me rewinding this pickup, for that guitar.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And that one, I did use it's funny. Sometimes they'll get cute with it and I'll be like, well, I'll wind it to like 7,777 turns on the neck pickup. But I will say, like, in general, like I prefer overwound bridge pickups and then underwound on the neck, because it is very common. Like the neck is already a very dark sounding position. This is where I kind of want to do a deeper dive. Like I know a lot about pickups, but there's probably even more that I don't know, despite all the tests I've done. And there's a lot of questions I don't have answers to. And it's like, well, what is the difference between my pickup and like a hot rail? I'm like, well, looking at the inductance and the resonant frequency, I'm like, I don't know. There might be like, I think some of these things, there's all this stuff about, it's all marketing gimmicks. And I said, well, maybe, I'm like the anti-marketer. Like I'll tell people, I've like talked people out of, I said, well, if you like to pick up in your guitar, then don't worry about it. And they're like, oh, okay, then I won't buy this. But part of it too is like, if I'm overburdened with stuff, a lot of times I just don't feel like doing it. I'm like, it's too hard. I said, I'm backed up and I don't have time but I do try to be honest with people. I'm like, if I really think they would like it, I'm like, sure. That's one reason I like with this setup I have on my Strat. everything's out of the way. I kind of got the idea from the Alembic Stratoblaster to make my own.
That's a great toggle. I love that input.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, if I could get, I mean, I can make them, but again, with the router table, it takes a little bit, for such a small part. I'm like, oh, it'd be so easy to make CNC, but like it's totally reversible. You have two holes. You can have your top loading jack plate, and then you can have a 3-way switch. And then I actually originally had a mini toggle before I went to the 2 pickup and the 3-way switch here. I used to have the regular 3 pickups and a 5-way. And I actually designated this. I had a mini toggle I set for a series parallel switch down here. Because it's just a free, you have all this real estate here that opens up with that kind of jack plate where now you get, and then you can use the right angle plugs if you want without them. It really fits really nice in here.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. These no switch in the way because I was always hitting the switch. I do a lot of that, stuff up here. And I would always hit the switch, and then I always would be hitting the. And I when I play back here, I do a lot of muting.
Knob.
Yeah, the volume knob would get in the way, and I like having all that open space. But the one benefit too with the pickups is when you have a phase switch. This is where I figured out, like, if you go to series out of phase, you can kind of, because with this overwound bridge pickup, it's like my friend Steve was like, yeah, you can't. He used to do a lot of surf stuff in his band. They'd always do like a surf medley. They're primarily a blues band, like kind of, it'd be like a Jay Giles kind of, but they would throw in like a surf medley, and he said he would need that super treble on the bridge pickup. But I said, it's not the same thing, but you can, it almost acts like it's like a bass cut, it's like I pull up here for series and then do that for out of phase.
Wow.
So it's like you go from here and it's just series out of phase. And you get this super, like your low end just like disappears. It's like this biting kind of.
Your demo video of that guitar is phenomenal. The different sounds you're getting out of it. It's just incredible.
Well, thanks. And and I feel like on tellies, I've done it for people where it's you've already got 2 pickups and you've got 2 chrome knurled knobs. And I said, if you want to do it, it's like the series parallel switch and then the in phase out of phase switch. I just called it something like ultimate 2 pickup. I mean, it's a very like cool. You get 2 push pull pots, and it's just because then you get 6 sounds out of 2 pickups. It's like amazing. And it's all right there. And it's
so the only thing original about that Fender is the body.
Yeah, I would say I think just about. It's like I made the pick guard, and the original motivation for doing the pick guard as well was actually that it had aged. It's a 2005, and it's like, okay, at the time it was like 18 years maybe, and it had turned the same, polar bear peeing in the snow yellow as the body did. And I'm like, well, I mean, I like the contrast of the stark white against the, said it's all the same color. I said, well, that's not like the Woodstock Strat. So I said, I want to cut a new, so that kind of evolved over time into. If
you're not careful, you're going to start getting requests for that guitar.
I did have someone request it, and again, that was the hang up. I said, well, I mean, I can do I said they're probably not going to like the price of making a pick guard copy and then winding 2 pickups and wiring everything together. But that's one of the reasons too that I love to put these videos up. Like when you mentioned that the Not Splice video I did. And I had a guy email me, I think if he's watching this ever, I forget if his name's, I get so many emails, but like Dale or Daniel, he's one of the 2. It's Dale but he had a great idea. He got into pickup winding, and he's told me some stuff. Like he's like pretty new to it. He's been doing it for some months now, but he was brand new when he started messaging me. But he's like, oh, what if you used copper tape? Like, could you potentially use copper tape as a splicing material? And I said, you probably could, Like I said, that's a pretty good idea, because he showed me a link to a guy's video on making humbuckers, and very different from the way I do it with 4 conductors. I said, wow, that's brilliant. He said he actually uses copper tape on the bobbin, and he will solder the 4 conductor leads instead of splicing them to like the pigtails on the humbucker. He'll put copper tape on the humbucker bobbins themselves and then solder the 4 conductors directly on to the, it's basically more streamlined. It's like soldering those pigtails on the 4 conductor. It's like, it's such a pain. You got heat shrink tubing over it.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, look, get the way Gibson did it. Yeah. So, I mean, that's another thing too, is I'm always very open to, again, I've had customers over, when I was testing the neck relief, and I got the idea from a customer. I was using, what was I? Well, anyway, I was trying to do something. I was using the digital action gauge. I said, for people that don't have a digital neck relief gauge, if you're trying to use like a feeler gauge or a digital action gauge and you want to get an actual measurement for your neck relief, And I put a capo up here, and then I'm holding it down at the last fret and using my other hand. And I had a customer over that said, well, why don't you take like a popsicle stick and thread it between the strings down here so you can just depress the string at the end with a popsicle stick. It's like having a capo on the end. So now you got both hands free. And I was like, holy crap. But he's right. I said, that's a great idea. I said, you could just do that. Now I got both hands free and I can.
Wow. Fantastic.
I have had to keep, check my ego at the door a lot of times where you have like a customer that'll suggest something and, sometimes your initial response is like, oh, well,
I'm a luthier. I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And it's like a gut thing could be like, oh, a little offense. And said, wow, they're actually right. I said, I've had people that like, I know the popsicle stick. I was like, oh my God, like I never thought of that.
A new tool in the tool chest. Yeah.
Yep. So
suddenly you're eating popsicles all the time.
Oh yeah. But yeah, I guess that's the gist with, all of those topics. Like part of the reason I don't offer certain things, kind of en masse is like, if I haven't perfected something, you know what I mean? It's especially like with the fretwork, it's like, it's like I have to know, because I mean, I can tolerate like my guitar. If I bend that high E string up too much, it does choke out. But it's like I got that right now at like 25 thousandths at the 12th fret. It's ridiculously low. So it's like I'm willing to live with some things, and it's like if I want to play that I have to adjust it up higher, I'll do that. But I like it where it is, and it's kind of like, you know what I mean? I'm still on this quest to define, like I mentioned, that lowest reasonable action. Like I've been meaning to pick. There's this guy. I don't know if you've heard of him. His name's James Gay. He expert fretwork on Instagram. I mean, the stuff I've seen him post is just brilliant. Now, I mean, he says he's done over 10,000 Plex scans. And like he said, it's very operator dependent. So he goes, it's not like you just put it in and it just does. He goes, you have to know. So I've been trying to get him on the phone because I'm like, man, with this whole lowest reasonable action thing, I mean, I look at guitars as mechanical objects, and it's like if you have let's say a 25.5-inch scale, 9 to 42 gauge strings, like there has to be a perfect curvature to the frets to have a minimal, you know what I mean? It's like you got a string on one end and the other, like there's. Yeah, I'm like, and yes, guitars are going to have kind of different things going on, but like, there has to be an ideal, and I'm like, I want to know what that is, because it's like I'll set the
holy grail.
Yeah, and it's like just to know like what can I reasonably expect, and I've kind of like with this guitar, and again, it depends on where you want to bend. Like again, if you want the really big bends. Generally, people are going to do those higher up. It's if you're going to be doing like a 2 or 3 whole step bend. I don't see a lot of people doing that at the 4th fret. Right, right, what I mean. So like there is something to the fall away where fall away is that as very special, right? You have that kind of gradual disproportional decrease in height. Where now from 12 to the end, it's what I love about guitars. There's so many factors to take into play because the whole neck, it's like, well, people don't tend to play the same stuff up here as they play down here.
Right.
And the string tension's also much higher down here near the nut. Very hard to bend the strings down here. It's one reason I love the 13.5 on the G string. You can do those. I could bend I tune down to E flat on top of that. So my strings are they're like rubber bands, but that's the way I love it. But you know what I mean? It's like what I love about guitars. You got 6 very different strings. You've got, the top 3 strings, you're going to be doing all this bending. And then even from the B and the G, you're bending them in, like with vibrato, you can pull the G and the B out this way. On the E string, stationary vibrato, you got to push it in that way. So it's like there's so many idiosyncrasies with guitar that are just so fascinating to try to figure out. It's a large
map to navigate for sure.
It is. Oh yeah. Like playing them and then the tech work exactly like, because it's just so interesting. So, but with the fretwork, it's like, I don't want someone to be like, I mean, and it does work. I get them playing great. Most people I do work for, it's like they'll ask me to raise could you bring it up a bit? I'm like, yeah, you always want to hear that.
Yeah.
You don't want it like on teetering on the edge of like choking out and like, oh, it's a little high. And it's like, oh God.
I've developed a questionnaire for season 2. You're going to be one of the first episodes for season 2. And I decided to hammer down, kind of like Stephen Colbert does. He has the Colbert questionnaire, and he asks all these people the same, and it gets to the psyche of the individual. You get to know them a little better based on their answers. So I've developed kind of my questionnaire, and I'm going to go ahead and run through them right here. Let me see what your thoughts are on these. So number one, the question is, what's the wildest repair or mod that you've ever had to deal with?
So I'd say it's a tie between, there was this Elger 12 string, and this was a repair at a local music store. Again, I was working with Steve at the time.
Okay.
And we would go pick up repairs, and he gave it to me to do. So this 12 string comes in, and I could share a picture with you, later. It's like, I have it. The bridge was basically, it was coming off. We needed a bridge re-glue, but it was super bad. I mean, this was literally like the hump on the, like, let's say this is flat, like the hump in the middle, like where the bridge was coming up. It was completely, I was like, oh man, this is really bad. So, and I know my infamous epoxy re-glue video, my bridge re-glues, that Steve taught me to re-glue bridges with epoxy. I never even knew. People said, oh, this hide glue type bond. So, he learned back with Dan, 1968. He said they would have him coming back once in a while, the glue letting go. And he was like, I need something that's going to guarantee this is never going to,
Yeah.
So anyway, and again, this Elger 12 string is a fairly cheap guitar, plywood top. So, I do it exactly the way he showed me. So a couple of the braces were loose, so I re-glued those, and then I epoxied the bridge on, right? And this is the really interesting part. I saturated the top with CA glue, like after I got the bridge off. It was all torn up, and at the time I had a go bar deck I had made, so I actually flattened the top because it was so bad. I flattened it prior to doing this stuff, so I had the top flattened out, and then I CA glued I figured the glue will set up and maybe harden it. And also, if you don't CA glue the plies before epoxying it, the epoxy will bond to the wood fibers. So here's the really interesting thing, because people will be, oh, it'll ruin the guitar, you'll never get it off. Well, guess what happened after I got that repair done? It was about 2 weeks later. We're picking up repairs, and we see the case for the Elger 12 string. I was like, what? Like, that was, I epoxied that, took it out. It was exactly the same as it was the first time. It was almost even worse. Like the bridge had actually started coming off again.
Wow.
And this is what really was an education in that, because epoxying the bridge on, what I actually noticed, there was actually much less tear out the second time, and I didn't use heat or anything. I just got it off cold with that trowel that I use. And there was only one little piece that came off. The rest of the bridge was actually this layer of CA glue that I had put down, and it didn't rip anything up. So I said, well, there it is. I mean, I said, if the bridge lifts up, the epoxy is not going to rip the guitar apart. It might if you don't use the CA glue first. I think it's very important that you epoxy over the. So anyway, then after a lot of contemplation, and here at the time too, I was like 19 years old or 20, and I was like, this was like the most complicated repair I had ever seen. And I ended up having to make a new bridge plate for it. I was looking at it, and the plate was like, it didn't look broken, but I said, there's like a little seam between, and it was a very flimsy plate. It was like, there's almost nothing to it. So I had a piece of maple that, the plate, when I got it out, it came out in like multiple pieces, but like it was probably only about, it was really thin. I would almost say maybe even, total guess, but like maybe 65 thousandths thick, or so. It was a very thin plate, and I said, well, that would explain why the thing imploded. So I made I made it out of maple, and that was like, I was like, I never want to do that again. I was like, I have no plate to go by. So I remember trying to put popsicle sticks inside to measure everything out. And I cut out this 1/8 inch thick maple bridge plate. And I didn't even say, I was like, I'm going to leave it 1/8 of an inch. I said, this thing is so screwed up. I said, and I epoxied that in too. I said, I remember I had this thing rigged up on the go bar, because this was bad. When I say like the action was like, you could fit a cat under the strings. It was just, there was no way. So, but I remember epoxying that on, and I had it rigged up in my go bar deck, and I had it clamped every which way. Like I was flat. I wanted that top as flat as I could possibly get it, even, in a bit, recessed when I epoxied that plate in. Because to my thinking, I said, well, epoxy sets up pretty hard. And I said, I want that clamped and glued in there. And I left it for a couple days, flat. And sure enough, when I let the clamps go, it actually seemed pretty flat, when I took them off. And then I epoxied the bridge back on again. I was like, I said, this is not coming back. So it was a tie between that and this Grand Prix bass that this guy, this is one, and I ended up making almost I think I lost money on it. It took me like 10 months to finish this thing. And it was out of a pawn shop, and it had a custom spray painted pick guard. The thing kind of looked like crap, but it was a kind of cool design, but it wasn't done very well. Black bass, black pick guard with like a green, design on it. And it was just a total junker. You know, this thing was like horrible. And now this guy comes to me and says, well, I want this to look like it came out of the Fender custom shop. And he's like, he wanted, you know, he got like a Babbitt's bridge for it. He got these like lace sensor. He wanted me to route out for a Stingray pick, like a lace sensor Stingray pickup in the bridge position. This is a P bass, right? A P bass.
Okay.
So he wanted me to route for that. And he also got a new neck for it where he wanted new tuners. I'm like, okay, he wanted me to cut a nut for it, do the fret work on it. And then also too, he wanted me to refinish the body in white nitro, like stark white. You know, and I told him it's, you know, you clear coat that, it's going to yellow over time. He's like, oh, no, I can't have that. So I spent like, you know, weeks looking for like acrylic non-yellowing lacquer. I finally settled on doing a white color coat, like no clear coat. I just put crazy amounts of color on it so I could buff it out without going through the color coat.
Wow.
But it was like, and I actually, the pick guard wouldn't, you know, I get the new neck, and of course the old pick guard doesn't fit with the new neck. And it had been, and it also looked like crap. So I spent probably one of the hardest parts of that job is I designed a pick guard. I couldn't use the original as a template, so I couldn't do my usual tracing. I just drew it out on like construction paper, then made a template out of plywood, and from scratch, you know, it's like I redesigned this. It was like 2 spirals with these like straight lines. It was almost like you know, like that Japanese like rising sun, you know, kind of thing. But it had like these, you know, these lines flaring out, these perfectly straight lines flaring out. And I remember getting a protractor. And I drew it out on paper, and I redesigned this. I bought a set of French curves, and I like redrew the spirals, and I mapped everything out like with a protractor and got like this perfect angle. So like it took me like, I don't even know how long to kind of draw out that design for the pick guard. And then I had to find out, well, how am I going to do this? So it's like black pick guard. And then I sprayed a base coat down. You know, I did it in green. I did a green base coat, which I mixed up the color myself because nothing matched it. So this was like insane. You know, I mean, I'm doing a, you know, nitrocellulose on a black pick guard. I get the perfect green color. Okay. Now I got to do the design. So I had to figure out how to use Mylar film, and I had to cut out my own stencil and then figure out you got to use spray it. Yeah. It was like spray adhesive onto the pick guard to adhere and then I got an airbrush, and it's like I mixed up, you know, some black nitro, and I'm doing the, and then it started getting
money on that one for sure.
Oh yeah, it was. Oh, and then the guy started pulling this, you know, oh well, I don't have any money. I'm like, oh my god,
come on, dude.
Like that, yeah, oh yeah, but it was like, and I think also too, the kicker on the whole thing was the neck. He's like, oh, an independent luthier made this neck, and the headstock, the tuners on this, it's a bass neck, right? 4 tuners. They were so far off. I mean, they literally drilled the holes for the tuners off by more than 1/4 of an inch.
Whoa.
It was literally, if you put the tune, I put a tuner on it, strung up the low E string. You couldn't tighten it up. It was literally not even touching the nut. It was like 1/4 of an inch to the left of the edge of the nut. I was like, oh my God.
Yikes.
So that had to be, and Steve helped me out on that one. I was like, what do I do? And I plugged it and I re-drilled him. I said, now what am I going to do? He said, well, you can put a, you know, like, he's like, I think you could do like a rosewood veneer over and I was just, I mean, that was, oh yeah. So custom airbrush pick guard, a total nitro refinish after routing for a new pickup, new neck with cutting a bone nut and all. I was like, and I think I walked, and he actually had me do another, a Telly Deluxe, same exact thing, except he had me install a Floyd Rose on it. and then at the end of all of this, after like this, and I had these guitars here for like over a year, and then he wasn't paying anything, and you know, I left it at Steve's house because he can handle customers way better, and I think I probably had hundreds into those between the finishing and everything else. Those take the cake for, I think, the craziest repairs. It was like those were kind of a big influence on me too, to be like, okay, well, I'm not going to take on stuff like this ever again.
Yeah, learn how to say no.
Yeah.
Question number 2, Matt. What's the greatest guitar ever made?
So for me, you know, no, it's funny. For me, I mean, I'm a Strat guy.
Yeah.
And this is going to be, you're never going to hear this opinion anywhere else, probably in the world, you know, but like in my mind, it is a tiebreaker between the Fender Stratocaster and then for fretless guitar, the Gibson SG, you know, like I'm like, you know, like I did.
You're tooting your own horn.
Yeah. Well, you know, like, oh, not even on that. I mean, like the design of the guitar for the fretless access, I'm like, man, the cutaways in here, and somehow this ended up being a fretless, but like it's it's just perfect, and I had frets in it at one point, and I don't know what it was that I just, probably because I'm used to Strats, I just couldn't like vibe with it. But I don't know what it is about flat wounds and having no frets. I'm like, what's the ultimate fretless, like,
it's like skating on a beautifully Zamboni'd ice rink.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, but yeah, the Fender Strat, I'd say, like, for, I would say for the main reason being is and I think Leo designed, like the Ford cars, and everything, like they're kind of this modular design. It's like with this Strat, the only reason I was able to do this is because the inherent design of the guitars, like I would just call it so modular. Yeah. That like this pick guard, like, and I became obsessed with cutting pick guards because I said, man, you have so much that you could do. There's so much space on here that like you could make it anything you want. It's like, oh, you want 3 humbuckers, you want this, you want kill switch over here, you want that. And or in my case, like you want to go to a minimalist design. It's like, sure, I've got all this empty space, but like because the design is so elegant on the Strat.
Number 3, what's the one tool that you can't live without?
Yeah, so the first thing that came to mind, and again, I think of that that G-Tech Guitars digital neck relief gauge. Yeah. And I haven't had a chance yet to put together. I got it in the mail, the Doug Proper relief gauge. But I think that was really and it's kind of a tie. The guy that sells it, he sells it in a kit too. You can get the digital action gauge, which you can also, I primarily use that. I do use it for regular 12th fret action, but the first fret, at the nut, I will use that primarily for, measuring the first fret action. And I'd say those digital gauges, I'd call it a tie, but I'd say like that digital relief gauge, like that just elevated everything, to the next level. Cause I'm like, now I can get super precise measurements. It's like, I never was able to, like, the difference between dead straight and then being in 1,000th of a back bow is like, it's so difficult.
You can't eye that.
No. And like, that's where I've gone to as well with that digital. I don't do this every time. It is a little obsessive, but it does make sense, right? That digital relief gauge spans fret number 1. And then I think the probe touches fret 7 to measure your relief. And then the other leg of the tool goes on fret 16 and 17. And that's on a standard 25.5 scale. Yeah. So I started taking the digital relief gauge or digital action gauge, which is my favorite way of measuring fret height. That's also very cool. It's a free falling probe. So when you zero it out on the board, if there's nothing on, you can just glide it over and see the whole height of the fret over the whole length of it. But I will actually measure where those feet are touching, because occasionally there's like a digital gauge. Funnily enough, on my Strat a while back, I had measured it, and I don't know what I did with the leveling, or it could have been part of that katana thing, or maybe I went a little too far with the relief carving onto the middle of the neck. But the 7th fret was about 3/1000ths lower than the first fret, and then the 16th and the 17th. It was like, let's say it was at like 43/1000ths, and these are at 46. So I said, no wonder I was setting my neck to 0 on the meter, and then it was buzzing. I said, well, it's straight. Why should it? And I said, no, I didn't realize that, that fret was just, so I said, if you set it to 3/1000ths, now it'll be actually. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess between those two tools, and I hate that it has to be, so complicated, but I'm like, at least it only has 3 frets that are contact points, and then it measures at the 7th. So I said, you can measure 3 fret heights, because, again, what if you've got, just on the off chance you're doing a repair and you're using that digital gauge, but the 7th fret is lifted a little, or it's seated a little low, if you want to get the neck straight. So between those two tools, like, because I would say too, with that digital action gauge, the fret height is a major, and you can use the StuMac. I use those for years, the notch calipers. Yeah. But whatever you use, it's like the digital measurements are so critical to the setups that I do, because now it's like, filing the nut slots. I still do them, freehand. Like I like the idea of those feeler gauge guards. So you can't go, because I definitely had times I cut too far, and I'm like, maybe I will start, but I'll be like splitting like 1,000th. And like, you can see that with that digital gauge, take the string out of the slot, and I'll just couple passes, put it back in, and it's like, okay, it came down 0.5 or 1,000th. And it just allows you to get this level of precision that, because the way I was trained, it's like a contrast, like when Steve taught me, I didn't even use a string action gauge. He said, well, it's a good thing you can play. He goes, you got to be able to play a little bit so you can feel,
Right.
where the strings are. But like, I didn't have any, probably the first 10 years I was doing this, like I didn't measure anything. It was like literally all feel, like the way he learned back in the 60s.
Wow. Right.
And it would just be, and to my thinking now, like if I was going to train someone else, it would be like, man, if you get those digital measurements in, and the string action gauges are also great. They're phenomenal. I mean, but like once you lock those in, so I would put that, because it's such an unknown tool like that. I actually was going to get another, because I said, what if he stops making them and mine dies? I said, oh no, I said, right. Cause it's this, that digital action gauge from, and now we got two, right? The Doug Proper one. But yeah, the G-Tech Guitars one, it's all aluminum, so it's like the feet, unlike Doug's, they're not adjustable, but like they do work. It's like I have it in the drawer. It's very slim, very narrow. It's like I pull it out, bang it onto the thing, and it's held zero. I check it every once in a while. I've never had to. I think I re-zeroed it like once or twice.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like, but so I'd say for the novelty, and then for the utility of how critical neck relief measurements are.
So question number 4, Matt. Pick one: vintage or modern guitars.
So for me, modern, strictly because of the modification, like my kind of proclivities for having things the way I like it, so it's like the way I think of like my Strat. It's almost like, I will say, playing that 1969, like doing the Hendrix stuff on that Strat was very cool. I was like, it is very, I've never owned, well, I guess, my dad has an old Vox Spitfire. Those were not very good guitars though. No, but I did set it up. Cool. But he said, yeah, they are cool. And I said, there is a certain, I know the bass player in my old band is very adamant about the mojo. He's like the energy they kind of have throughout the decades.
Sure.
So I would say like for me personally, I know Steve he'd have people that wanted him to like modify, and he won't do it. He's like, I'm not doing that. Like a vintage Strat. He's like, if you find someone that'll modify it, they can do it. Like, he's like, I'm not putting a Floyd on like a 65, Strat, like to him, it's like sacrilege or something. Now, I mean, for me, so for guitars, I like in terms of playability and all that, because I like such a unique modification. I would just kind of leave the vintage guitars as they are. It's almost like it's like art pieces. It's like a piece of history.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say
modern's more of a blank canvas.
Yeah, and that's what I like, because I said that's also the stuff I can, like, if I screw something up or change my mind, it's like I'm not going to be. It's very low stress. Again, it's like kind of like going to an open jam versus having a set list at like Carnegie Hall. Go. Like, no, I just want to go up and have fun. I don't want to be sweating bullets. Right. It's like the hardest thing I ever did in my life. Like,
question number 5. What's the most common mistake guitar players make with their instruments?
Okay, let's see. Okay, so right on a tech level, right? I keep forgetting the guitar right now. Not playing, right? The tech. So first temptation I have is the truss rod. That's usually, I think people really misunderstand, what it does. And that and that's actually one of the most critical things to avoid. I had a couple customers that came, both of them actually. I said, man, please next time
come to
the action gets high or something, just drop them by here, because they actually snapped the rod. And this is, but one was on an Ovation and one was on the vintage Ovation. This was like a 70s, and they literally, I mean, not stripped the adjuster, like that truss rod was snapped off. Like he brought it over, and it was like he brought the threaded portion end of the rod was off, and he's like, well, can't you fix that? I said, not really. I forget what like, you always want to go big to small, right? When you're doing the socket, or not the socket, like the Allen head adjusters on a truss rod.
Yeah.
Because I've seen people go up, like trying to find like a smaller size, going up to the proper size. And if they don't know what it's supposed to feel like, they shove like, maybe it's supposed to be like a 5 millimeter, and they put a 3/16 in.
Strips it out.
So it's always like, if you start too big and then work down to the right size, you're not going to, I've seen people go up small to big, and then you look in there with a flashlight and it's like a circle.
Number 6, what's the most underrated piece of guitar gear?
I really like the EBO.
The EBO.
And if
You've
you
got
remember
a couple videos on that,
Yeah, and like on the Machine Gun cover, for example, because everyone's using plugins nowadays, and I use the plugins on those. That was all direct in. I just but for those those super sustained notes where. this is such a cool device, and I think because it's not very popular, it's been on, I think, what was it? I think Heroes by, was it David Bowie or something? Like, I think so they used an EBO on that.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
Yeah. So like they've made,
yeah,
like they've made appearances, but it's like, I think they're capable of so much more than
sure.
like that. Like
number 7, if you could work on any famous guitarist's rig, past or present, who would it be?
So Jimi Hendrix, and it would be Jimi Hendrix. And I'd say that the main reason too that it wouldn't be Leo Kottke is because acoustics are way more difficult to work on.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Answer. Yeah, good answer.
Yeah.
Number 8, what's the best advice you'd give someone starting out as a guitar tech?
So, and kind of a little bit of a mixed bag here, because some of the advice Steve gave me, he said, when you're starting out, he's like, well, you gotta, and he told me, he's like, well, you're never going to make it in this if you don't take on everything. He's like, just do everything. And, and I think I agree with that. I think in the beginning, but I have seen people, which I didn't come to know this until much later, were like people that specialized in refinishing. Like they just found like they just were not good at repairs. Like they try and they just couldn't do it, or like even like setups, for some things that could be super easy for some people. Some people can't wrap their heads around certain things. So like, I guess, my advice would be, I agree with that. I think like try everything and do the best that you can on everything. Like I took everything I could, and, but I would say keep in the back of your mind, like it's okay to specialize. It's kind of like there's surgeons that just work on hands. It's like I'm a hand surgeon, or I'm like the best hernia surgeon in the world. I just do these like, and there are people that tell you like hernia specialists. There's surgeons that specialize in all kinds of things. So it's like, I think because there are some things that are so, some people are really good at them, like some of them like acoustic neck resets, and I think like being honest with yourself and knowing what your limitations are. It's like not everybody's going to be great at everything. And I remember being very disappointed in myself repeatedly when I couldn't perform up to on certain things, like the standard I wanted to. Because Steve was like he was like a second father to me, and then also this role model where it would be like, before, and he doesn't have any website or anything. He's just, again, this whole like big fish in a little pond thing. Yeah. And a very humble guy, but I'm like, man, the standard for this was so high. So I'd say doing guitar repairs, like it's okay to specialize. And I think to know what you specialize in, you should do everything and kind of get like, don't give up. Don't just because it's hard to do. But, there is a point where it's like, you know what I mean? Where you've done it, like where I've done like bridge plate repairs where I'm like, for me, it's way too time consuming, to be worth the cost, where like, so it's okay to specialize, but so I'd keep that in mind, like try everything, but don't like kill yourself over thinking you have to be the best at everything. Like it's okay to focus on what are you really good at. And, you can,
and I could see a guy like you, Matt, being a jack of all trades kind of, and master of a few.
Or very few.
Yeah. And I could see you being frustrated if there was one thing that's like, God, I really want to master this, but I just can't. And then to a guy who's trying to encompass it all, it would be a letdown for sure.
Yeah.
Something you have to overcome. Knowing that, admitting to yourself, this just isn't my thing, but this over here is. So.
Right. And knowing your customers will be happy, because I know Steve drilled that into me, which is another one. He said, you want them to open that case and just go, wow. Like they want it. You want them opening it up and just like, really, he's like, I aim to blow people away every time. And he said, even down to he would use this McGuire's mirror glaze. He'd always said that's the first wow factor is polishing out the frets and just mirror glaze coat on that. He said, the first thing they open that case, they see it shiny and they're just like, oh my God, wow. He
and
said,
I have to say, I almost hate when customers go, well, it's really shiny. Yeah, dude, but you don't know what else I've done to it. Really.
Exactly.
Number 9, music or no music while you're working?
So I have gone to no music in recent times only because of the video recording. So like I've had times where I wanted to kind of redo a video where I'm like, oh, this would be cool to have like an ASMR style, like workshop audio. Or so I've experimented with, like back in the day, I had like one video like that where it was making a saddle and I didn't have any voiceover from years ago. And then and it actually did pretty well. And I think I realized people kind of like, even if they don't do guitar work, they might like to So the idea I've come up with that I've started to do more videos like this is I just call it like a captioned instruction video where it's just workshop audio, and I'll spend hours, but it's like making subtitles that people can turn on or off. So at the beginning of the video, I'll just put a thing that says captioned instructions and show the little thing clicking the CC button. Yeah. So I'm like, but yeah, so I've had so many times I had music playing in the footage, and I'm working on these videos, and I'm like, like, I mean, and I'm just like, it's just so because I will say most of the time throughout the day, I have to consciously be like, okay, I got to turn it off. Yeah, for recording the video, because I just all day I'm listening to music, like all day long. I have usually something playing, so it's like, yes, music while I'm working, but not while I'm recording. So
makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, number 10, and this is a question that I posed to every interview last year. It's going to stick this year because it's so popular. You're stranded on a desert island. What 3 guitar tunes would you put on your desert island guitar mixtape?
And that's, my brain had drawn a blank. The thing that popped in my head first, I'm like, oh, that's not a guitar song. It was like Kiss from a Rose by Seal. I was like, wait, no. It's like, no. And then the other thought I had was strictly because of the coincidence for it. Leo Kottke, I think it was on Greenhouse, had a song called Tiny Island. And I was like, that's a pretty cool, Desert Island,
sure.
But it's a great, and it literally
Sticking
is about
the theme.
Like,
yeah,
it's like basically, about being, stranded on a little island. So so let's see. Yeah, but I mean, Tiny Island could be up there, but it's like I do kind of like the, one of the thoughts I had. I said, it's like, well, how long am I going to be stuck on this island for? So they said, if I'm going to start getting depressed or something, I want music that's going to really, pump me up a bit. Like with Hendrix, it's like Voodoo Child is always one, and I remember he did a live show where he said, "Oh, it's a song about a cat trying to build himself up," and it really is. It just puts you in this really positive state of mind. For me, it's just kind of really. I will say too, another one. Again, I think I'm immediately back to Hendrix because I'm like, man, all this guitar stuff.
But when I first heard Slight Return on the headphones, and he's doing that toggle switch clicking, oh my god, blown away.
Right, like the panning. I almost think they have something now. What do they call it? It's like I heard something. It's like 8D or some ridiculous, but like it's basically this swirling. And I'm like, Eddie Kramer was doing this, the panning on that.
Yes.
Like he's flipping the switch, but he got this circular,
just
like
phenomenal.
And like the phasing on the drums in Bold as Love. And I heard a story that like Hendrix came in and Eddie Kramer played it, and he said, well, what do you think of that? And I think he said he literally like fell on his knees and was like, oh my god. He's like, I had a dream that like it sounded exactly
awesome.
Like that,
awesome.
But so it's tough with I would say like Tiny Island as a mention for like it's to mention it as that, but I'm like, I think I would get too depressed listening to that on the island. And I'm like, okay, we got Voodoo Child, Slight Return. I'm like, man, Watermelon. You ever heard Watermelon on the 6 and 12 string guitar album? That one always puts me in a really good mood.
Cool.
And I'd say like that. Yeah, I'd say that would be good. And you're in like a tropical location, summertime. I mean, this is going to be way out of left field. I mean, it's not really guitar, but I consider it. Roy Harper, like he said on like it's funny. A lot of people don't know him, because it's like he's very well known over in England. But I mentioned, the guy that did vocals on Have a Cigar, and people said, oh no, I don't know who that is.
Okay, yeah.
But so like I'm trying to think of because he was actually, I think he was actually up there for me. It was like really. It was like Jimi Hendrix, Leo Kottke, and Roy Harper because like his style of playing was so unique.
Wow.
I saw him do I guess that would be it because this is such a unique one. There was a live version from an album that Roy Harper did it was a live album called Flashes from the Archives of Oblivion. Nice. And it was called it was the version there of Highway Blues.
Oh wow!
So that was the thing where it was mind blowing to me when I heard it because like here's a guy I think he played an Ovation acoustic. I think that's what I would see him most of the time when he played live at that time, and he had an Echoplex. And I don't know if he pre-recorded some of the vocals, but like it was just him by himself. And this Highway Blues, he gets this overdrive on this acoustic guitar, and he gets the vocals going, and now he's got like layers of vocals like harmonizing with himself, and it's like it's this wall of sound, and I'm like, it's just one guy, and I'm like, it was really so to me it's like one of the coolest, and I've never heard anybody mention like Roy Harper as like he mentioned, you ever heard that one Blackpool finger picked, it's on a Sophisticated Beggar. He had it's a finger style instrumental. He was very good friends with Jimmy Page, so like on his the Stormcock album, in the 70s, which was one of his biggest ones. It's a stormcock, this bird apparently in England that sings in, like, it'll be heavy rain and thunderstorms and stuff.
Wow.
So very interesting. But it was a 4-track album, and Jimmy Page played guitar on I think the second track was called The Same Old Rock.
Oh, that's why Zeppelin did Hats Off to Roy Harper.
Yeah, and I think Jimmy Page on that album, he used the pseudonym. I think it was like S. Flavius Mercurius, and it was like so. And apparently, they were very good friends. Him and Roy Harper. So, and at one live show where he's about to play Blackpool, this very nice, very unique, finger style steel string instrumental. And he said, I was once hanging out, and this guy, James Page, this guy wanted to learn this song, and he asked me how to play it, this guy by the name of James Page. And everyone starts laughing. They think it's a joke, He's like, you can tell he was a little, I don't know if he was like slightly offended. He's like, no, I actually, a
good story.
Really. I mean, he's like, no, I actually know that. He's like, I actually know him. Well, he's like, well, whatever. It's like, thought he was making a joke, but yeah, so Highway Blues from that album, the live
Highway
version
Blues, Voodoo Child's Slight Return.
And it was a Watermelon by Leo
Watermelon by Leo Kottke.
Yeah.
Matt, thank you so much, man. I appreciate your time. I look forward to seeing what you're going to do next and hearing what you're going to do next.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me. I mean, I appreciate it so much. And thanks for being patient with me. I know it's like a pinball in a pinball machine. So thanks for.
No, the more content, the merrier is my take on it.
All right.
Matt, you take good care of yourself. And thank you again for your time.
Hey, thank you.
Adios, amigo.